You're listening to the Basketball Lab podcast with your hosts Mark Shannon, Mark Clark, and Marco Corona. They'll discuss all the top news and stories from around the basketball world while giving their opinion and insight. Now, here are your hosts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Basketball Lab podcast. I'm your host, Mark Shannon, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mark Clark and Marco Corona. Finally, the NBA is like the season's complete, the longest season in NBA history. Felt like it was a never-ending season because of the pandemic and then the boycott and everything. But congratulations to the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis for winning their the title, knocking off the Miami Heat.
In how many games?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Marco, you're right. Six, Lakers in 6.
Yeah.
That's what you said, right? Just gotta rub it in there.
Yeah,
because
I have to get my shot in now.
Hey, I didn't do that.
Oh, not like anyone picked Heat in 7, right?
Actually, according to my notes.
Yeah. It's not like somebody picked the Nuggets in 7 over the Clippers or anything. You know what I mean?
That literally took 45 seconds. That was like 3 weeks ago.
Come on. You guys got it right. Can we move on?
So going on, keeping on with the series and how it ended and everything. Obviously, we figured more or less that the Lakers would win this series. LeBron James would win that title. What do you guys think? How the series went and how it played out the last game and everything like that, and the whole series in general?
Well, I mean, a valiant effort, I guess, is what we can use the word for the Miami Heat. I think that game 5 is when they emptied the tank, right? And I think they gave it everything they had. And, I kept on hearing, we left it all on the floor. They literally did, and they couldn't get it back. And it was a wrap by the end of the first quarter. You can tell that the Heat did not have their legs. Jimmy Butler had basically nothing left. And it wasn't for lack of effort. I mean, they try to execute, but at the end of the day, it was, they had their moments. They had their 2 games. I mean, they fought hard, they clawed, and they did everything that they possibly could. But it was too much LA, too much AD, everybody mostly everybody stepped up for the LA Lakers. And I didn't say anything yet. So yeah, I mean, I think, all joking aside, I said the Lakers in 6 and they got it done. You could argue that it could have been a sweep, based on a couple of games that the Lakers sort of took their foot off the gas. But shout out to Miami. That's a good team over there. And, I think that they're one more piece away from being right back to being another, Eastern Conference run or maybe a finals run again. Even though the Eastern Conference will be, very intense next year. But, at the end of the day, the better team won the championship. Simple as that.
100% facts. I mean, shout out to Lakers for, they're 2020 champs. Hard fought, well deserved. Shout out to LeBron and AD. I mean, they definitely deserve that win, that championship. Sorry. But yeah, as you said, Marco, it was done for the Heat in after the first quarter. It's just like they needed a 5-day break between game 5 and 6 to recover, because they really left everything out there on the floor in game 5 to be able to win that game and extend the series one more game. But it was done pretty early for the Heat in game 6, and they just couldn't compete. They didn't have their legs. It was just, you could see that they were just fatigued. They just didn't have any gas to go for one more game, and
right.
And that basically ended there for them. And you could tell too, because you could see the look on their face from early that they know that this is it. It's going to be done for us tonight.
Right. Had that first quarter maybe been, Heat down by 5 or a couple of possessions here and there, the complexion of the game maybe changes a bit. but I think the result is still the same as far as getting the Lakers getting that W. But I mean, it was, it is what it is, right? So.
But I mean, the series was pretty much over from the start for the Heat when with their injuries and that stuff. They just didn't really have too much of a fighting chance against the Lakers. So
I don't
it's
know
just that.
I don't know if a
Oh, go
healthy
ahead.
Heat team still beats the Lakers, though. I'm not gonna,
That's
right?
pretty much what I was getting to as
Okay,
well.
sorry.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that the Lakers was the better team. It's just
Yeah.
more experience, they're more rounded players. You see, they stuck to a pretty much a very limited set of guys. I think what 7, 8 guys that they stuck with,
Yeah.
and they just ride those that car until the wheels fell off, and they end up winning the championship. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't want to take away anything from LeBron and the Lakers winning that title, but you look at the road that the Lakers had to go on to get to the finals, to get to the NBA finals at the end of the day. Yeah, they had to play Portland. They knocked them out 4-1. Played the Rockets, beat them 4-1. Played the Nuggets, beat them 4-1. So at the end of the day, they had they won their games. They didn't have a hard series leading up to it. This was probably I would say more so, other than the first series against the Blazers was probably their hardest series leading up to this. But they ended up closing it out when it mattered. They lost that game 5. Lost the game 5, came back out and just dominated from opening tip-off to the end of the game. They didn't let up. You can't give teams, especially in the playoffs, and like I said, in this bubble, it's a lot different. It's not the same as playing at home. It's not the same as doing any of that. You can't let your foot off the other team's throat. You have to put the pedal to the metal and finish it off, and that's what LeBron and the Lakers did. Full credit to, like you said, to the Miami Heat. They did put in a valiant effort. Game 5 was that game that they were fighting for their lives in that game. And they ended up pulling out the victory in that game. And you saw it at the end of the game there in Game 5. Jimmy Butler was keeled over behind the basket. He was dead tired.
Yeah.
You can't say we can't give excuses or whatever. And all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you look at it in terms of if they were playing in at home, it was a regular thing, no bubble. There probably would have been a 2-day break between Game 5 and 6, right? Because of the travel.
They would be traveling, yeah.
Right, because it would have to travel back to Miami for Game 5 or whatever it is. I can't remember how, because I know the NBA does it a little bit differently than other sports, but because of the travel, right? So because of the travel, there might be, whether they were going to Miami or LA, whatever it was, there's the 2-day break. Gives Butler and the Heat a couple extra days, gives Goran Dragic a couple extra days to get himself healthy. Losing him early on in that series, I think was huge, or losing him was huge. And not being in there took away another scoring option for the Miami Heat. And they slowly had to rely on Jimmy Butler. And I wish that it could have been a better, like a harder fought series in terms of going to 7 games, giving us a little bit more excitement in terms of that. But maybe not for you, because then it ended up your way. But just a little bit more excitement at the end of the day after what's probably to me one of the best NBA playoffs, in my opinion, in terms of quality.
Right. So many storylines and so many things that that came out of this, and we learned a lot about different players and different organizations and teams, and obviously the NBA with the social justice movement as well, right? So there was different. I think the NBA did get it right, and like I said, if you go back, 10 episodes or 11 episodes ago, when we started talking, doing this podcast, the beginning of the bubble season, we had no idea what was going to happen, right? This was going to be something that we had never, any of us in our lifetime, had experienced before. Yeah. And I think that the NBA, we're giving a lot of credit to the Heat and a lot of credit to, the LA Lakers and all the other teams, but give the league some credit as well for, doing everything pretty much at par or like on point, rather to keep the entertainment value up in a unique environment, right? And the players, I mean, at the end of the day, say what you want, and these guys make millions and millions, but being away from their families and friends until later on in those rounds, it does make a difference because there's no, like you can't go home after you lose by 15 and hang out with your family and friends and your kids and sort of just
Yeah.
bring it down a notch, come back to reality. It's
It's a reset.
right? And the funny thing is that you see your opponents every day in the hotel lobby, in the restaurants, and that's a different dynamic as well, right? So it was a lot to get used to. And I think it was the proper way, and it was a lot of fun to watch. So it'll be really interesting to see, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves of what happens in January or whenever the season starts again.
To your point, Marco, did you see that to the point you made about you see your opponents every day, you see them when you go for a walk? I'm sure if you saw that video with Bam, he went for a walk after the finals and he walked past the Lakers party. That's how
that
small.
hurts.
Yeah,
that sucks. Oh man.
Like that's what he ran into on his walk. He probably was just trying to clear his head to, and
yeah. I would have crashed the party if I was gone. Totally.
Yeah, but
just say like JR invited me. Who's gonna say no?
I mean, I'm pretty sure they would have welcomed him. But is that a party you want to go to after you just lost to a
that's
team?
tampering. That's tampering. You can't do it. And LeBron will get blamed for that 100%.
Yeah, but back to your back to the Lakers and Heat, and it's just. You know how the Lakers doesn't really have a third scoring option? They just go with like whoever gets hot that night.
Yeah.
It basically was, and this is to Mark's point with Dragic not being in the series from early. Miami kind of didn't have a second option. It's just basically any random guy who got hot, and that was one of the things that kind of hurt their game. And as you said, Mark, with Dragic not being in the series from early, it really did hurt now.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think that it's sort of like you don't have one guy or two guys always doing most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But I think that was the strength of Miami because they didn't have just the one guy or two guys doing it. They were spreading the wealth. Unfortunately, they didn't have a closer in addition to Jimmy Butler. Because, Jimmy Butler can be your guy. But he's, again, unlike certain players in certain cities that, have been paid and traded to do their job as a two-way player that I'm not going to name. Jimmy Butler was guarding their best player and trying to be their best player on the other side. Yeah, right?
That's a lot of work.
And to your point, there was no other support. So let's not to talk about the Raptors at this particular point, but Kawhi at least had Spicy P, right? Like you focus all your energy on Kawhi, but Spicy P can still give you 25, 26 points. This was
and you still had
year.
Freddie stretching the
floor, right? And
you
had Freddie, and then you had other guys that also had been there, but they hadn't been to the finals, right? And I mean, we have to give credit to Hero and Robinson and all those guys, but at the end of the day, these are supporting pieces, and they're not really your pieces that you're going to say, for sure, I know that I can count on you for 15, 20 points, 25, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, to your point, Mark, as much credit as we want to give Miami for their effort, I think that this summer, or maybe even following summer, the winter, I guess, free agency, Pat Riley's going to be, making some phone calls to try to get Jimmy some help.
He's gonna spend in some money. He's gonna go all out.
They'll figure it out. Miami always figures it out.
Right, and that's sort of my point in terms of and obviously a lot of things changed early on in the series when they lost they lost Bam, they lost Goran. You know what I mean? And Bam definitely wasn't playing at 100%. There's no way he was playing at 100%, right?
No.
So you're not getting the same Bam you got at the last game against Boston. You're not getting the same Bam. You know what I mean? You're getting a banged up Bam going against Anthony Davis. It's a recipe for disaster right there.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the end of the season too. 90% of the guys they're more likely banged up in some way. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And I know to Marco's point earlier, he said about the Miami Heat talking about like they're gonna be a team to contend with in the Eastern Conference. Going back to if there were fans playing on other teams' home court, will they be the same team? Will they be as hard to beat going forward into the new season if there's fans or they're playing on other teams' home courts again? Playing in the bubble's a lot different than playing at playing on some other team's home court. Going to play at the ACC, going to play in Boston with a full stadium of fans, or even a half the stadium of fans, is a lot different than playing with nobody in the stands.
Even in Miami too, because I feel like that's one team that really does feed off their fans.
Yeah, when they
like
show
Boston,
up,
like Raptors. Yeah,
when they're not too busy on the beach tanning, it's a tough place to
for
play.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Basketball Lab podcast. Make sure to follow us on our social media. You could follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the B-Ball Lab. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Basketball Lab podcast, and you could also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music.